Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
The Liberal Prime Minister has lost control of spending, and he's lost control of his own cabinet. The outgoing Finance Minister promised that a massive $40 billion deficit would be her fiscal guardrail, but it looks like the Prime Minister and the incoming Finance Minister, Carbon Tax Carney, are pushing her through the guardrail and over the fiscal cliff with the rest of Canadians. So will the Prime Minister stand up today and admit that he's having his outgoing Finance Minister take the fall so that he can replace her with Carbon Tax Carney?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
They are trying to distract from their voting record, Mr. Speaker. In this House of Commons, when this government put forward legislation, affirmed last night by the Senate, in fact, to cut GST for families looking to buy kids' clothes, diapers, car seats, families that want to go out to a restaurant, someone who wants to buy beer or cider. They're against that, Mr. Speaker. Lots of slogans when it comes to cutting taxes, but that's all they have, Mr. Speaker. Empty slogans. When it comes down to it, we put a tax cut forward, and they voted against it.
Right on. The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
A tiny 2-month tax trick is not going to help the more than 2 million Canadians lined up at food banks every month, or pennies off of Pepsi for Canadians who are going to pay $800 more for groceries in 2025. So this Prime Minister is forcing his outgoing Finance Minister to take the fall for the effects of his inflationary spending that's pushing his $40 billion deficit guardrail right to past and over the cliff. So will the Prime Minister admit that it is in fact his inflationary spending that's the cause of this massive deficit?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing.
The lowest debt and deficit in the G7, Mr. Speaker. A 5th consecutive interest rate decline. What is that? That is good news, Mr. Speaker, for business owners looking to expand. It's good news for mortgage holders looking to renew, families looking to buy a home, Mr. Speaker, and there's many other examples. They want to distract from their record. In fact, think about the Harper years. The worst rate of economic growth had Stephen Harper going back to R.B. Bennett in the 1930s, Mr. Speaker. They're not serious about these things.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Good news. He's talking about good news like Canadians have never had it so good. The highest household debt because Canadians can't afford to pay their mortgages. They can't afford to feed themselves. They can't afford to heat their homes or put gas in their cars after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister who said that the budget would balance itself, that he doesn't think about monetary policy, and it should be the bankers that worry about the economy. Even his caucus is calling for some fiscal sanity after 9 years of his economic vandalism. When the deficit smashes through $40 billion, will at least he allow his caucus to have a free vote?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
He talks about people at food banks, Mr. Speaker. We're not insensitive to that. Canadians have had a hard time. What has this government done? We've supported them through the pandemic. Continue to show support, Mr. Speaker. They want to cut their pensions. They want to cut employment insurance. We have a school food program, in fact, that is supporting no less than 400,000 kids in 4 different provinces. They voted against that too, Mr. Speaker. Shameful. The Canada Child Benefit, today parents will see a direct deposit put into their account. Guess what? They're also against that, Mr. Speaker. They don't care.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about what could be more than $40 billion. A carbon-taxing, coal-loving Carney, a finance minister on the run, a prime minister not into monetary policy. They hike taxes, they fuel inflation, they crash through the fiscal guardrails and off the cliff. This government is a chaotic clown show. Which one of them will call a carbon tax election?
Just to make sure everybody's, just watch the words that they use. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, we see the Conservatives dive into insults because they actually have no plan for the economy. And I think they just can't stand the fact that we have a finance minister who was able to renegotiate NAFTA with the previous Trump administration. We were able to see supports being delivered to businesses and Canadians through the worst global pandemic.
Oh, come on through. Come on through. What is happening here? Wow, what is this lady doing? Trampling horses. Trampling. Stop it. Stop it. What? Oh my God.
And, Mr. Speaker, we continue to see interest rates drop, and tomorrow we see a tax break for all Canadians. So while they want to know about a free vote, I'm wondering if they'll have a free question.
No. The honourable member for Lakeland.
The finance minister actually admits deficits cause inflation. She promised a cap of an already wacko $40 billion, but the prime minister bullied to crash her through that so-called guardrail with billions more. He sets her up to take the fall, and Canadians will pay the price. Now, like a long line of women, the prime minister kicks her to the curb for his conflict of interest carbon tax crony Carney. Is the prime minister really going to bully his female finance minister to read carbon tax Carney's fiscal update and then blame her for breaking the $40 billion deficit promise?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, this is a minister who stood up to Putin, who renegotiated trade deals with the U.S., who worked and helped Canadians get through a global health pandemic. Mr. Speaker, she doesn't get bullied, but it seems that perhaps the Conservative caucus is projecting the fact that if they don't read the Conservative leaders' lines, if they don't rhyme enough, they don't get question time. So while we are working and focused on providing tax relief to Canadians, Conservatives are making sure they rack up those gold stars.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Look, we all know the Prime Minister says women experience him differently, but it's his pattern to elbow them to the side, and it's sad to see a woman spinning for him. He's incompetent, unaccountable, and bullies subordinate women, blames and shames them, then replaces them with his buddies. He's aggressively recruited carbon tax Carney, yet calls himself a proud feminist. Canadians can't afford this. Will this complete weak fake stop all the hypocrisy and admit his inflationary spending forces the finance minister to break her $40 billion deficit promise?